So yes, thank you for doing this. I'm with the great Russell Kelley, who has had multiple careers over the course of his very interesting life. He's got an impressive background in folk, blues, and rock music. Has had a number one hit song in Quebec, has toured extensively across the US and Canada, and has been involved in many, many initiatives, also in government, provincially and federally. He was also the head of music for Canada Council. So, welcome, Russell.
Thank you, Phil. It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to talk.
Well, we've been waiting to do this for a while. I've known you for a couple of decades at least,
Yes, indeed.
and what I always wanted to know is how did you start in music? Because I met you as a senior executive, if I can put it that way, at the Canada Council for the Arts. So take me back to the early years, how Russell Kelley became a musician, because that's a big part of your story.
So it started when I was 6 years old. And my very first piano teacher was this woman named Daisy Sweeney. Daisy Sweeney was Oscar Peterson's sister.
So you were taught by the great Daisy Sweeney.
Absolutely. At 6 years old. And then we did that for about a year. And then I stopped, and who knows why? I'm not sure. But then I ended up taking piano lessons after that with another woman, and I'm going to forget her name, which is terrible. It tells you how old.
It'll come back, I'm sure.
Yes, ultimately. Anyways, it was. I took piano for quite a number of years, and I ended up going to school with these guys that we would go down the street singing. We'd go out to Dairy Queen singing. We sang wherever we went. And so we ended up ultimately with a group that after high school was over, we all sort of hit the road. And we ended up playing universities in the US through this organization that sort of came and found us, which was really nice. And it was an incredible start. The very first place we played, to give you a sense of how Hollywood this whole thing was,
Okay.
I'm trying desperately now to remember the name. It was one of the major state universities in Illinois. And we came in, and when we drove in, there were four of us in a group. It was a group called Rings and Things. And we ended up being sort of conducted to this cavernous sort of lunchroom, but a big thing. It was 1,000 people type size thing, and we're going, oh, this is going to be terrible. How it's going to work. And then we saw the stage that they had set up for us in this cafeteria. And on it was a state-of-the-art Altec Lansing PA system, the best PA system you could possibly have. And we just looked at each other and went, oh, this is going to be fun.
That's a good time now.
We had 200 people the first night. We had 500 people the next night. And we had, at one point, it was 2,000, but then we couldn't count how many people. They didn't know how many people. The place was just jam-packed, and we were getting standing ovations after songs. And at that point, we went, oh, maybe we're pretty good. Literally. There was nothing to prepare us for that at all. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of everything.
So at that point, what do you guys as a group say, that perhaps we can make a go of this, or we're going to go back to Canada to get regular jobs, quote unquote?
No, at that point we said, this is interesting. Let's see what happens. Let's go with it. We can always go back to university, but what do we, how will we, what does it felt like something sort of magical was happening because we knew we had a really neat blend. What we didn't know was, would this really work with what we were, with audiences, and would the original material work with audiences and all of that sort of stuff, and all of those things seemed to happen, and not every place went crazy for us the same way that first start was, but it was always good. And we ended up going out on these tours of U.S. universities, I think 3 or 4 times. And each time it was good. We bought ourselves an Econoline van and traveled and did all of that sort of stuff. And we did that, like I said, I think it was 4 times. And after that, sort of started to break up and different things happened, and we played in different configurations for a while, and then I ended up doing a little bit of stuff on my own, and at a certain point decided, because I was starting a family and everything, that I needed something more secure, and ended up went through being an intern at the Canada Council for the Arts, which didn't pay me enough, and I lost my house in Nova Scotia and all those sorts of things.
Oh boy.
But within a year, I was a program officer, and then it all sort of turned around and started to become pretty amazing. And I ultimately ended up as the head of the music section.
I think it's a little bit more complicated than that, and you're being somewhat diplomatic, but you also worked in Nova Scotia.
I did.
And you were working with the Arts Council out there?
I sort of created the Arts Council there.
Oh, okay. Now we're getting there.
ED and all of that sort of and all of that sort of stuff. And it didn't last. I mean, it didn't last me. It meaning that it's, I at a certain point, I get the call for the council, and I went for that, and then they didn't keep it going.
Oh boy! So you spent 25 years out in Nova Scotia.
I did, but playing. The performing part was a large part of that.
Okay.
And I, after about 8 years of playing, I damaged my vocal cords, and that's what led to the whole sort of thing of working in arts councils.
So now I remember having a conversation with you, Russ, and I've read it elsewhere, that for most people, that would be considered a career-ending move as a musician.
Yes.
How long were you out of the mix as a musician?
Probably about, I was always in music. That was the wonderful thing that happened in my life, is that I always stayed at either I was helping other people because of being a funding officer and all those sorts of things, or ultimately I created an arts council in Nova Scotia, which was cool. But music just was the thing. It never changed. And I lived an entire life in music in various sorts, really and truly. The only time I wasn't doing that was when I was younger and I was in the mailroom for Seagrams.
A summer job, perhaps?
I went to university. That's what paid for it.
Yes, I understand. Now, talk to me about a publishing deal that you had with MCA.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was mid-career. and I'm getting to be an old man. So some of these stories are stories more than they're. Anyways, what happened was at one point I came home from university in this case, and the phone rang. And I picked it up, and this guy said, "Hi, my name is," and I'm calling from MCA Music Publishing, and in New York, and we've heard some people doing some of your songs and would like to sign you to a publishing deal. And I said, "Yeah, right. Who is this really?" And he said, "No." I said, "Yeah. All right, give me your phone number and I'll call you back." And he gave me this New York phone number. I had to go through the MCA switchboard to get back to David. And anyway, so he said, "Look, I said, okay." He said, "Yeah, no, we listen, we've heard people doing your songs. We like your songs. We'd like to sign you to a publishing deal. Why don't you come down and you can play a set at the bitter end?" The bitter end was the folk, major folk venue in North America at that point.
Wow.
Really, like it was the hot place to be. People got bound by playing at the bitter end. And so we went in and we did basically an audition at the bitter end and started touring state universities in the U.S. And we traveled pretty much. We stayed in a boundary which was Wisconsin to the west, and North Carolina to the south, and then we played most of the state universities in between that and Montreal.
So it sounds to me like the university scene was healthy, thriving. There was a lot of work there. Was that your experience?
That was our experience, and that was only because, again, the guy that we ran who found us, his job was to pick out people who he thought to work in that circuit and really do the job. And so Montreal was one of his destinations for looking. And we and another couple of groups from Montreal ended up on that circuit for a while. And we did a couple of tours a year for about 3 or 4 years. Wow. And it was like 2 months or so each one of those, spending a week or half a week in different universities.
So give me some context, because you guys, you talked about it. It sounds like a Hollywood story. It truly probably was very unusual, given what we know about the Canadian music scene.
Yep.
And by that I mean this didn't happen every day. So no. you guys are riding high.
It was pretty interesting. The only thing that didn't happen in all of that journey was the only thing that didn't happen was making a major recording. And it was interesting because MCA Music was the primary source for all of the music that went into the university thing. But we never really made any sort of major recordings at all, which was too bad.
Is there a reason for that?
Which was cool. But sung in a French version by a woman named Renee Martel. She had a bunch of hits and all stuff in Quebec, and one of my tunes in translation was one of hers hits.
And it became a #1 pop hit, right?
Oh, yeah. That actually made me quite a lot of money, which was really
Congratulations there.
Yeah. There's an incredibly wonderful feeling having something that you created come back to you as a resource thing, and suddenly you can buy this and buy that you couldn't get before.
before. Yes, yes. So when that happened, did your life change much?
Nope. It changed internally, and that was the great pleasure for me. To hear a song of mine on the radio was wonderful, like where it was real, like it was number one hit kind of thing.
Yes. Yes.
The money was good. It wasn't crazy because
Hmm.
it was, again, a small-ish market overall.
Yeah.
It was useful. If I had been French speaking, it would have changed my life significantly more.
How
But
so? How so? How so?
because then I could have promoted what I was doing directly to the market, which I couldn't
Okay.
do.
Right.
And it was just, so it really just became a one-off that it happened. But for me, from a sort of a confidence point of view and um, all those sorts of things that go with suddenly being able to, turn on the radio and there's something you created. It was very positive. It made me feel very, very good about what I was doing. And when we just, but I really loved singing. And I thought that I would actually be a singer for all of my life. And
Hmm.
that's what I do. And at one point, I ended up, unfortunately, over singing
Hmm.
and really, really damaged my vocal cords and had to stop. And in some ways, that's probably one of the best things that happened to me in a certain way,
Hmm.
because that's the point at which I had to find out other things about what can I possibly do. Immediately, because I had a house and a family, I ended up keeping that alive by selling cookbooks and
Oh,
all
okay.
these crazy things, and,
Okay.
and until other things opened up in front of me, and they ultimately did, and it just
Now, now
I ended up staying in the arts as a consequence.
it sounded to me like um, you obviously, are amongst a small group of very successful artists, and I wonder, whether that was true of a lot of folk artists. I don't know if you consider yourself a folk artist, a rock artist, a blues artist. How do you define your music?
That's really, you know what? I've never been able to, because there are little bits of all of that in the things that I was writing. I wrote things that were more folk oriented,
Hmm.
only because of the tempo and the nature of what the song was about. The rock things, well, rock, I was never sort of rock, although I did write some things that were pretty hard.
Hmm.
But the sort of, I was always interested in good music, but I was also interested in reasonable lyrics and all those sorts of things like that. And for whatever reason, it seemed to work. I was always sort of surprised, and I was never, I never sort of walked around trying to sell songs or stuff, but a few people here and there would be doing my material, and the Rene Martel thing was extraordinary. That was quite wonderful to have something be big that like
That
really
big. Yeah.
hit. If it would have been in English, I would have made a lot more money, and it would have had a more impact on my actual me career and me
Yes.
singing things. But that didn't happen that way, and that was okay. It really
Did
was okay.
did you consider, because the way people describe your career as a musician, I mean, you're a singer, songwriter, and guitarist. Did you ever, for a minute, consider, focusing on writing songs because you were so good at it?
Um, No, I liked playing. I really did, and I liked singing. I was a good singer, and I really enjoyed it. It's I still play. I still sing. It's an it, I had I had a couple of very, very good music teachers and
Mm-hmm.
voice,
Mm-hmm.
and I appreciated that. And I appreciated and worked. I very rarely mistreated my vocal cords, but occasionally that happened. But
Mm-hmm.
not to any real serious permanent damage, which was good.
Mm-hmm.
And I, um, I there's nothing like being able to sing a song. I ended up doing working with this organization called Home Roots, which was this ingenious guy, Mitch Pradalik, who's long gone, unfortunately. And he was the creator of the Winnipeg Folk Festival, just to give you
Yes.
context of Mitch.
Yes.
But he also started this thing called Home Roots. And Home Roots they were basically organized house concert tours.
What a
And so,
concept.
absolutely. And it was, from a performance view, probably my most favorite thing to do, because the intimacy, you can see people crying when you're actually playing things and they're into it. I mean, it's like
Yes.
they're just right there in front of you.
Yeah.
It was magical. I think I went out on one, two, three, four. Somewhere, I can't remember exactly anymore. I should sit down and figure that out. But I think it was about 6 different tours,
Oh.
mostly certainly covered all of the West. I actually and I covered the country doing house concerts pretty much as well. And the intimacy of that was very rewarding. It felt very, very different than the concert stage
Being on a stage,
and
yeah.
even the folk festival stage. It was very, very intimate. You could watch people literally crying. You could see the tears rolling down their face when you really touched them.
Touch them, yeah.
Just, it was extraordinary and wonderful.
So that must have been, I mean, yes, you're a number one hit selling songwriter, and here you are in a very intimate environment,
Yeah.
bringing people to tears. That's a whole different ballgame from, the early years, right?
Yeah.
Touring Wisconsin and all those other places,
Yeah.
Illinois. That's special.
It was really amazing. It's been, I've got to see all of Canada and a good chunk of the U.S. So certainly the mid to the Atlantic of the U.S. And it was wonderful, really wonderful.
That's a
The
very
home
special
thing
time.
was just me. That was just me going out. But the American show things were with high school buddies.
Wow.
Three. Yeah, we did that for quite a long time, just together as high school buddies.
There's almost a fairy tale like quality to it, going out with your high school buddies, blowing up, and doing tours in
Yeah,
colleges, universities, man. That's special too.
yeah, it's out of the books, man. It's just like it's people write about that stuff or make movies, but it was wonderful, and I felt we all felt very grateful that all of that stuff happened. And everybody had other things that they were going to do. And for me, it ended up being in the arts funding thing as
Yes.
a serious, career thing,
Yes.
which made, I could something to retire on.
Well,
Just,
let's talk about that because I remember in one of our conversations, Russ, that you know, and I don't want to, just brush this off because as one black man to another, I wasn't used to seeing someone in the capacity of head of music for Canada Council, someone that looked like me.
Uh,
And, I'm sure I'm not alone in this. How did that make you feel? Was it difficult taking on a job like that?
um, I was the jobs that I had and the trajectory to particularly the council jobs were the only thing I can call them wonderful. This is the only way I can describe it.
Mm,
I had because I grew up in Westmount. There
that's
were
in Montreal.
very
Yes.
in Montreal. There were very, very, very few Black families there.
Yes.
So all of my friends were white. All of the people I interacted with were white. So when I went out doing all of the things that I did, I was pretty much the one Black person in the room 90% of the time, easily.
So that's an environment that you were at ease with.
I was very comfortable. And it was very interesting because I could tell, like in a shot, when people had problems
Yeah.
with my skin color and who I was.
Yes.
And I could tell the people who were really pleasantly surprised because, of course, if I grew up in a white environment, my vocabulary, all of these things were
Yes.
very not what people would expect.
Precisely.
And for lots of people. And I enjoyed it all, to be honest with you. Just going, I mean, I could feel obviously intimidated here and there and stuff, but it was really interesting. And I had some incredibly powerful people who believed in me.
Amen.
There was a guy named Mr. McCormick. Mr. McCormick was one of the senior vice presidents of Seagram's.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with his kids. We were sort of in the same things at the Y and partly in some of the schools. So when I was really young, I got to see what it was like to live in a mansion.
Okay.
So it gave me an understanding of from the bottom, which is where we had come from before my family moved into Westmount. We were in the Saint Henri area, and we moved when I was 6 from there to this little street in Westmount. And life was suddenly, it's like somebody turned lights on. And everything was just pretty, versus tenement. And all of that stuff allowed me to understand both all of the advantages that had just fallen to me against, knowing full well that other people, particularly other guys and Black guys that I would know and talk to and stuff, where they weren't getting, it wasn't that they weren't getting things, it was that they, from a very early age, my sort of vision of what I could possibly do, I think, was easily broader than if I would have remained living around St. Antoine and all of those streets. Yes. It changed. And I'm sort of going, I always sort of, you look over your shoulder all the time. But then I watched all the people who mentored me. And there were some, like I said, very powerful people. And they mentored me, and they chose to do that. And I was always incredibly grateful. I mean, it was an extraordinary thing to have happen.
Well, you have an extraordinary life, and I was still waiting for the book, which never came. I'll forgive you for that
It's
because
not.
for me, and I'm speaking for myself here, not for anyone else, it was such a joy seeing you in that position at Canada Council because it certainly wasn't the norm. And so I saw that as, yeah, the possibilities are endless, you know, that kind of thing.
And that's whenever I could, uh, I wish I would have, not even I wish anything. I was really busy doing what I was doing. But
Hmm.
I wish I would have been, there were some different people. What I knew what I was trying to be and very aware of was a role model as best I possibly could. Just so that, and I know I changed from the white side of the Caucasian side of things. People were very surprised by how well I could speak, like all of these different things.
Yes.
And I was very well aware that I was making people look at people differently.
Yes.
I wanted that to happen, and I know it did in many cases. And I would watch. Anyways, I'm going to stop there on
Did you,
that.
did you, did you, did, I know you mentored a lot of people. We've had many, many conversations. I felt privileged to have these conversations with you. Um, I guess my last question around that, not about the interview, but around that, was that did you consider that a burden or an opportunity
Oh,
to,
I always
to
thought of it. I always thought of it as an opportunity. But it was every once in a while I thought, well, would I do more than this? And I kept going, well, there at a certain point you just, I don't know. I I I found that there's a certain point at which I looked at my family and I thought, no, I'm going to put my energy into my family.
yes,
I'm going to be a crusader.
yes,
Uh, I'm going to do the things that I make sure that my kids have every advantage they possibly can to be powerful, to be good, all of those sorts of things,
hmm,
and be, as far as I was concerned, the best and greatest thing I could possibly do beyond any of these other things that I was doing, and
yes,
that's what I focused on. Um, every once in a while, I would run into people, and we would end up having long talks. And I'm going, okay, this is good, because you could see other black guys sort of going, and sometimes a couple of guys saying, going, how do you do what you're doing? And we would,
what's your secret, right?
yeah, and I would go, it's figure out what you want, be comfortable in who you are, speak with confidence, trust that if know what you're trying to do, that you can accomplish it, all of those sorts of things, and prepare yourself, do stuff to make sure you can live up to what you want. Um, it was fascinating. I felt very
I'm
lucky.
telling you, those are still wise words. They were then, they still are now. And you talk about navigating some of these racial differences, but you yourself are the product of Afro-Metis people.
Yes,
So that's another
yes.
component of the life of Russell Kelley. Tell me about that.
Something. It's there was a part of me that always had this sort of pride in having Aboriginal blood mixed in with black and white. It just, and I didn't know about it, of course, when I was really young, but at a certain point, there was one point where there was a DNA thing, and I looked at it and I said, oh, that's there. Okay.
Was it a requirement? Was it a requirement? Oh, you just did that on your own?
No, it was, I forget why the DNA thing was done, but I think it was just an opportunity. And I said, yeah, sure, expecting one thing and something totally different than what I expected. And
so how's that informed you as an individual? I know there was supposed to be an event coming up in May here in Toronto, for which we were hoping that you'd be performing, but that's another story. But being of Afro-Metis extraction, I'm wondering how did that make you feel? Did that have any impact on your life in any way, shape, or form?
Not dramatically. It did from a personal point of view. I found it wonderful. if I can say, it was to have the genetics that I have made me feel like there were people in my past who made decisions to be together in love and whatever it is, and literally whatever it is, because you never know.
Yeah.
But it gave me a grounding in what I think this country is, which is really strange to say, but to have Black, white, and Aboriginal, even though it's a small percentage, made me Canadian.
A proud Canadian, no less.
And I thought I liked it. I liked that a lot. Mm-hmm. And I had Aboriginal friends, and I thought, oh, this is cool. And I didn't push on that. Most of them probably don't know even now.
Yes.
Genetics in there, because I always thought, that it's one of those, you have to be careful about those things. And I was always very, very cautious about it. I don't want to claim what I'm not, which is I never grew up that way.
Yes.
And I don't want to claim it. I can claim who I am, and who I am is this mix.
But there's also this album. I think there are two albums now that is out there dealing with Afro-Metis music.
Yes.
What was the thinking behind that?
Yeah, it isn't necessarily Afro-Metis music. What it is a proclamation, because that's the one thing as artists that this group had in common. We all had the same triple, Black, white, and Aboriginal genetics.
Yes.
That was sort of the coming together place for sitting down all of it separately, really, and writing material that would feed into something that collectively would be a representation of that. And it was really, George Eliot Clarke pushed on this. He was sort of the driver. Mm-hmm. And it really was to say, look, we are real. This is a real thing in this country, and this is this country.
Amen. Yes.
And that was what that was really about. And it gave us even though the songs weren't really about it, it created an environment make this thing happen and have a meaning to each of us, and it I thought it worked well in the sort of, because everybody had to create songs with that in the back of their mind, and so it tempered how some of the songs were created as it should, and so it's.
Now, I'm just wondering, there's a second album that's going to be celebrated here in Toronto in May. And, you know, I was hoping to see you there, but you won't unfortunately be there.
Yeah.
But your music will be there. Tell me about that. Tell me about that, Russ.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can tell you ta-da.
There you go.
I really like the two songs I'm contributing to this. I'm very, very proud of them. They're probably the last two songs I'm likely to ever they're the last two I'm going to ever record, probably. And I just, and they have their, they don't necessarily fit the package in some ways.
How so?
Well, just because they're not the first one, I sort of focused on the idea of black, white, Aboriginal, black, white, and red. Mm-hmm. These two songs came about because I wanted to speak to different things. So Beauty is Beauty, right, is very straightforward on what it's about, which is there's beauty all around us. If you look for the beauty around us, you will find it.
You'll find it, yes.
You won't, you know? And
yes.
That's, to me, that's sad, you know? Beauty is beauty wherever it comes from. Beauty is beauty wherever it goes. Beauty is beauty, fills my heart, satisfies my soul. That's the key of the song.
All right. Now, what about the other song you wrote to?
Yeah, it's called We Don't Need to Stand Alone, and it's one of those, you know, to lift you up. We don't need to stand alone, if we can't do it on our own. We all I can't even remember my own lyrics. That's terrible. Do I have them written? No, I don't. So, anyways, it's another helping to lift people up. That's all. Both of them are about that.
So can I ask then, what has been the response to this collaboration and, you know, the music that you guys all produce?
I don't know, actually. We've done I haven't been part, and I'm going to miss the release of this one in Toronto. And I haven't been out for neither of these. Have I been out, you know, doing any real shows of any real type, which is okay. I mean, you know, it is what it is. But I think the album, I hope that the music gets out there, so that, because I always think music like this will touch an awful lot of people, you know, particularly people of color and mixed color and all of those sorts of things. And to have because most of the songs all of the songs are positive and strong and all of those sorts of things. And, you know, it's, and my colleagues on this are just, you know, they're incredible and geniuses and all those sorts of things. And it's as I should be.
Well, you know, I want to pay you a compliment here, because it was through our conversations that led me to finding out more, musically speaking, about the Afro-Metis people, if I can put it that way. And, you know, I came back to the Canada Black Music Archives and said to our team here we have to make sure that we document this because, in my view, I don't know that enough people are aware of this. Do you know what I mean? And it's as Canadian as anything.
It is seriously, seriously Canadian. Because I'm not sure how much this has happened in the US or not. What I do know is it's happened with regularity in this country.
Yes.
And I find it, I think it's really important, which is why I've spent time on both these albums, because I think it really matters that people have an awareness of this type, this not the reality, but just, well, it is the reality.
It is a reality. And
Yeah.
and one thing we do know, and this also led me to being part of the creation of this archive, is to expand people's awareness,
Absolutely.
about these musical contributions. And I, like you and all the others that participated on that, feel like we're expanding people's consciousness.
Yes. Yes. And it gives people one of the things about music is music are tools as much as they are things that, they allow people to see things they may not notice any other way. And I think that's one of the things for me why I was very happy to participate in this, because it's important, and it's important. It's really important.
I couldn't agree more. And so, when I got the press release from Sheila White,
Yep.
who's connected to another famous Nova Scotian, Portia White.
Yes, indeed.
We just recently invited Sylvia Hamilton, who made a documentary about Portia White, talks about how difficult it is to be a documentary filmmaker.
Yep.
And despite that, she was able to do some amazing things.
Sylvia's, I think she's a genius, just to tell you that. There isn't, some people are go-getting and all of those sorts of things, but Sylvia has a drive that is extraordinary. And I think she's truly a genius. I think she's accomplished things very quietly. At some point, I hope she gets celebrated, really truly gets celebrated, because her work is going to be very meaningful, particularly in the future.
And reading her bio and all the things that she's done, there were people who showed up, including Sheila White, that were amazed at this documentary, and then to hear about all the other things that she had accomplished. It's like her work has traveled the world.
Yep.
And is continuing to amaze people.
Yep. And very quietly, it's extraordinary the influence she's been having. And it's extraordinary. I'm a serious fan.
Well, I'll say this as well. I mean, your music is reaching a French audience, and I don't know where else it has traveled to. I know it's traveled to the United States and Canada. And how do you feel looking back at both your careers, starting with being a musician and then being a bureaucrat, if I can call it that?
Yes, indeed. The music side has always been, the center of who I am and all that sort of stuff. And the opportunity to, I played clubs in Montreal growing up, a lot of them downtown on Crescent Street and all that.
Yes.
I played, then I played stuff, same thing, clubs in Nova Scotia and the Maritimes. And I've done house concerts all across the country and all of those sorts of things. For me, that's what the richness of music, being an artist, musician and songwriter is truly about, because I've been able to come in contact and seen all kinds of things across this country with and touched people's hearts in different ways, which is really cool and extraordinary. And I always feel incredibly grateful for having that type of opportunity. It's extraordinary and it feels wonderful.
Well, I also would add there, before we get to you being a civil servant, few have had that opportunity to travel across this country in a way that you have. And let's just also add the United States, where you
Yep.
traveled as well and performing as a musician. You truly know what it's like living in Canada from coast to coast to coast, I would say.
Yeah, I've seen it all, and a good chunk of the U.S. too, which is really amazing. And that's sort of it's one of those gifts of being a musician and stuff. The type, it's not. What's interesting is it isn't about geography. It's about people. And you meet people in all of these different places, and everybody's different, and everybody's the same, and it's really, really fascinating. It's fascinating.
And a very enriching experience, I would add.
Absolutely. Oh no, it's an education that is. It's a serious high level education.
For sure.
I wish, the more people who want to be crazy and go out and do this thing and travel and, bump into people and hang out in people's houses and all that sort of stuff. If you get a chance to do it. Because you learn, you get to understand humanity in a way that is really, really, really positive, which is interesting because, a lot of people try to tell, a lot of people are afraid. There's no question.
Yes.
And that gets taken away once you start to see people everywhere. And you realize, wait a sec, yeah, there are bad people out there, but there are way more good people. Way more good people.
Well said, because I do believe that. Now, that's one legacy, but how about your legacy as a civil servant from Nova Scotia to Ottawa?
Yeah. What was interesting about all of that? One of the things that I was very well aware of, and I recognized that the Canada Council at a certain point made whoever the boards of the Canada Council, literally the Canada Council, the board, made real choices way back about diversity and representation.
Yes.
Brilliant strategy, because it's had a real impact on, I think, an awful lot of people, how they see the world differently. And by that, I mean, particularly, artists of color, Aboriginal artists. There's a vindication of your existence, a sense that you are truly part of something.
Yes.
That feeling is really seriously important. And it's seriously important that the diversity of artists get out there, their material gets out there so that people of color and Aboriginal people see themselves in the larger collective. Because when you go, wait a sec, we are this, we are this, we are more than what it feels like day to day. We are here, we are there. It matters that people have a real sense that there are possibilities, so that the kids grow up with a true sense of possibility. The game keeps expanding as it should. It gets the challenges with opportunity get leveled. As that happens in the country, it's to everybody's favor that it continues and strengthens, because it's critically important to the well-being fundamentally of everybody.
I think that's so well said, and what a message to hear at this particular time on both levels, both as a musician and as someone who's worked at some of the highest levels in the bureaucracy. I really want to say, it's been an honor to be able to have all these many conversations with you. I've learned a lot from hearing, you express yourself. And I know others here in Toronto where I'm based who have also expressed the same thing. So, if they never get to thank you personally, I want to thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. And thank you for what you do. It really matters.
Well, thank you.
It does.
Well, I've always felt that there were people like yourself who understand the value of expanding the cake, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Right? So we can all take a bite of it and embrace the fact that this is what Canada is.
Yeah. Oh no, it's seriously special in many ways. It grows better and better.
Yes. So thank you for taking the time, Russell. And I hope we get to have many more conversations, because I truly enjoy it. I just felt that for the benefit of our audience at the Canada Black Music Archives, who've never been as fortunate as I, they get to know the man, Russell Kelley.
Oh, thank you, Phil. I'm honored. Thank you.
Have a great day, and we
You
will
too.
talk soon. Take care.
Absolutely. Anytime.